Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the Writers Connect convention. I'm Tamara Lush and I'll be the moderator for this session. It's really good to see so many people here. I'm in California, so it's 6 a.m. I haven't yet had my coffee, so hopefully I'll be able to pull this off without doing something stupid. This panel is called The Power of Genre, How Romance Challenges Our Perspective on Art. Now, I'm a romance author and I've published several romances on Wattpad. In March of 2020, my book Drive will be printed by Wattpad Books, and you can pre-order that now, by the way. For you romance authors, I'm sure you've all experienced this, the eye roll. At the mere mention of a romance novel, you get the eye roll. But where does that eye roll, those preconceptions come from? Why should they exist at all? Wattpad is home to more than 90 million readers and writers worldwide, and is the digital space where romance stories and romance fans thrive. Scoff or not, its audience is undeniable. From teen love stories to Muslim romances, paranormal, LGBTQIAP plus affairs, and everything in between, there's a love-laden story for everyone on Wattpad. That's what we're here to discuss this morning. So let's introduce our panelists. Alix and Nick Hicks are a co-authoring couple who write paranormal romance, contemporary, and historical fiction, highlighting LGBTQ characters. They've been writing together for just over 10 years and entered the STARS program in 2021. They are the authors of the book Wolf and Witch. Amber Samuel is a teacher, Dalmatian mom, and soon-to-be published author of The Many Dates of Indigo. The Houston native graduated from Westfield High School and earned a political science degree from Sam Houston State University. Her lust for words and passion for prose halted her conquest of a law degree, but the vibrant collection of completed manuscripts, a thriving blog called Peppermint Sunshine, and devoted readers are an assurance that she made the right choice. Avery Keelan is a writer of hockey romance and adult contemporary romance. She's a gym addict and a diehard coffee lover. Her stories contain swoon-worthy happily ever afters with lovable characters, snarky banter, and enough steam to fog up a mirror. Plus, of course, a hefty dose of drama and angst along the way. When not writing, she's spending time with her family, reading, or enjoying the great Canadian outdoors. So let's start with our first question, and we'll start with Nick and Alix. Why romance? What drew you to start writing in this genre?
We really wanted to kind of gauge whether there would be interest in our writing, and up until we wrote Wolf and Witch, we had really only written kind of more of in the action and drama type of categories. We wrote a lot of westerns, we wrote paranormal stuff, but nothing really in romance. And so when I started kind of researching what people were reading the most and enjoying the most on Wattpad, romance was overwhelmingly what we found. And it was kind of a intimidating task to us.
And what was the first thing I did? I did the eye roll.
Yeah,
I did the traditional. I was like, romance, really? And then, there was this, like, it was a challenge. It was like, can we do something that I initially was like, I don't know if that's something that's really in our vein. I don't know. And now it's one of my favorite books that we've written.
Great. Okay, Amber, how about you?
I started off writing mystery thrillers. And so I saw an episode of Being Mary Jane, and I saw a character that I wanted to explore, and the plot was a romance. So I was like, just let me give this a shot. And then I was hooked because I loved writing it, and I got more stories to write.
Great. Avery, how about you?
Yeah, I think I started kind of reading more indie romance from like 2014. And then I don't know what year it was, but I stumbled upon Chasing Red, which is obviously like a huge Wattpad classic. And something just like clicked for me. And I was like, oh, this is kind of like I was dabbling in writing, but not really knowing my lane. And I was starting to sort of dip my toe into it. But as soon as I read that, I was just like, oh my God, this is just what I'm meant to write. I don't know. It just clicked for me. And I was like, this appeals to kind of like my, I don't know, it's like an internal sense of justice for me. Like you go through this big journey and then at the end, it's all worth it because you know how the end is going to turn out.
Great. I started reading romance when I was far too young, probably like half of the Wattpad readership. So I don't know if any of you read romance when you were younger or teenagers or snuck the sexy books. So Wattpad is home to more than 90 million readers. And so a large part of that is romance readers. We all know that. But it is definitely a trend that extends beyond Wattpad. We all talk about how romance keeps the lights on in traditional publishing. What do you think it is about romance that has captured the attention of so many readers in a way that no other genre has been able to do? We'll start with Amber on this one.
Me first? Whoa. I think it's because romance is fun. Like, you kind of get able to root for the characters. You fall in love with the characters, falling in love with each other. You love the witty banter, the meet cutes. It's a great escape from the normality of every day. And you just get to live vicariously through these two people, or, it could be three. I don't know. People falling in love. And it's fun. It's entertaining. And I think people just love it.
Avery, what are your thoughts?
I think it's just the experience. It's kind of like a dopamine hit. I think it's just very like rewarding to read, like the back and forth. You have the tension and the ups and downs. So you're kind of like, if it's well executed, you're turning the page because there's like that tension there that keeps the story driving forward. And I mean, romantic love is a fairly universal experience. So it's something I think a lot of people can identify with on some level. So it's part of the human experience.
And Alix and Nick, do you have a take on this?
Yeah, I think it's just what Avery said. It's the human experience. There's a lot of other genres and things that might scratch a particular itch, but there's one thing that all humans have in common, and that's our need to be loved and feel a connection. And I think that's something that no matter what genre it is, if the subgenre is romance, then you get that human connection, that feeling that everybody needs to be accepted.
I think like by default too, romance, because to be a romance, the romance itself needs to be the focus. That makes romance character focused by default. And you can't really read something, in my opinion, that's character focused and not end up being connected or feeling connected to the characters.
Sure. I've always also thought that romance shows that difficult people and problems, and it also shows that people are worthy of love, that everyone is worthy of love. And that's been my overall thoughts about romance, is that no matter how difficult somebody is or prickly or grumpy, they are deserving of love. And that's what we all want, right? Do you think it's tapping into something else that readers are drawn to, or it's just escapist fun? Avery, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I definitely personally do like romance for some of the escapist appeal, because at the end, it's going to work out if it's a genre romance and has the happily ever after. But I think like there's a good dose of angst and other things in a lot of romance stories. Not always, it depends on the author. I think a lot of romance is also about like the journey and the personal growth. I mean, you start off with the wound in theory and they're overcoming that. So I think there's also like a transformative aspect to that, just showing that, two people who are flawed or whatever can sort of overcome those things and come together and be wholehearted at the end.
Avery, what about you?
Oh, that was me. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Amber, I was sorry. It's really early.
Amber, do you think it's
tapping into that escapist fun, or do you think readers are drawn to something else?
I think it's a bit of both. It's the escapist part, and it's also, we get to see people conquer their fears, and we get to see them being warriors and fighting whatever thing that they impacted in their past and combating trauma to become a fully healed person and be able to love. So I think in a way it gives us hope in ourselves that if we put the work into, we can also find love, and that there is someone out there for everyone. So it fits in that hope that we all have.
So jumping off of that, Alix and Nick, do you think that takes on special significance for LGBTQ romances?
Absolutely. I think the concept of romance, even for aromantics, is just, I probably said that wrong, so recognizable that you don't have to share really any characteristics almost with the main characters or the love interests to be able to feel like I know how that feels, because there's just something so human about the idea of wanting to find that connection, wanting to feel that connection, no matter who you are. And I think that romance can work like a bridge in that way for people to understand that, you know, I might not be gay or queer or trans, but I've been there. I've felt exactly what this character is going through. And for people who haven't been exposed maybe in their own culture or their own lives to people who are marginalized, I feel like there's something really important about that.
It humanizes them in a way that you might not think about, you know, somebody like that. But then when you share a common emotion and you get inside that person's skin, you immediately just start to feel a connection.
Empathize.
Yeah. That's the word.
We got there.
There is a lot of empathy necessary in romance. And I see it when readers read and comment on, especially the heroine. I think that readers sometimes can be harsh on the heroine, but then they end up empathizing with her, which is a transformation. So obviously readers connect with romance. They love to read it. But what about the larger literary world itself? At times, it seems like the genre's credentials or place in the publishing landscape are discredited, despite the fact that it's the biggest moneymaker for the publishing industry. The genre and the general public puts it down as just pop art with little literary relevance. I've had people say, "Oh, are you still writing those little romances?" I'm like, is this something you've experienced or heard, Amber?
Me, no, I have not experienced it. I have heard it on Twitter, but not experienced it myself. I mean, I'm the type of person that I'm going to write what I want to write, and I don't tend to worry about how someone feels about it. As long as people love what I'm writing and I love what I'm writing, then it's okay with me. So I don't dwell on what the publishing world says about a genre. Mm-hmm. If I have a story and a character that has a voice that wants to be expressed, I just express it.
Alix and Nick?
What was the question?
Oh, have you experienced or heard any sort of discrediting of what you write? Have you had any snarky comments? Has anyone said anything kind of disparaging about the genre to you?
No, but I used to be disparaging of the genre, and then I had this concept, and I still kind of do, that romance is more of a subgenre. It's because it can fit under any other genre. You can have action romance, you can have fantasy romance, and I think that's why it reaches such a wide variety of people.
Why do you think you had those thoughts before?
Just because of the way that I looked at, you could quantify certain things, but romance seemed to be able to plug into any other genre that I would think about, like, a Western, but you can also have a romance there, and you could have a sci-fi action, and you could also plug in a romance. And I think you see that a lot in movies. There's always the romance in a lot of, whatever movie that you watch. And there's this underlying theme of, like, the hero gets the girl. That's one of the oldest themes. So it's like romance is always there.
So kind of like maybe because it was something that you felt like was almost always just in a lot of ways shoehorned in to kind of fill out a plot, maybe. that kind of fed into the idea that it's not difficult, maybe, to write a romance, or which is completely not true. We found that out. Romance is very difficult to write, especially if it's not something that you just have this natural kind of ability to do. But
yeah, you kind of see it everywhere, and then you just start to take it for granted because the Superman gets the girl, there's the romance,
the girl always gets the swoony guy at the end.
Avery, have you had any experiences with people saying snarky things about your writing or what you read?
Not like firsthand. Like Amber said, you see a lot of it on Twitter. I think like every year around Valentine's Day, for example, there's always some bad takes in the media about romance. So it's always like pull your hair out in February. Romance is really misunderstood too. So you'll get like Nicholas Sparks and like all these people that are not romance authors lumped in with us, which really just perpetuates some of the misconceptions surrounding romance. I don't think it's a coincidence that romance is like female dominated and is geared, largely to women's empowerment, or like, broadly speaking. I don't think there's a coincidence that it's looked down upon when you factor in the female element there. Like there's definitely some element of societal sexism going on there too. Like directly, I haven't had a whole lot of that though. Like everyone else has said, like I feel pretty comfortable with what I write in terms of the fact that romance is not easy. Like I'm proud to be a romance writer because it's hard to write a good romance. It's really hard to take a writer on a journey that's like compelling emotionally when they do know the ending, and you have to suck them in and still have them convinced on some plausible level that happily ever after may or may not actually be within grasp, even though they kind of know it is. Like they're coming along for the ride. But I think doing that well is a challenge. So
it's really hard writing a romance. It's hard packing in all the emotion, all the action, all the sex, if there's sex. And I think it needs to be said that not every romance has sex in it. Not every romance has to have sex, needs to have sex. It can be very chaste. There doesn't even need to be kissing. So I think that's really important to say. But I do think that people, at least the people I know, probably older people, have this idea that it's bodice rippers, and that suddenly Fabio is going to somehow materialize at his age of 75 and be on my book cover. But really, that's not the case. So that's not the case. And maybe these opinions don't matter. The readers love it, and that's enough. That's what matters, right? Is that readers love it, and readers consume all of the romance. It's sometimes referred to as women's fiction. And Avery touched a little bit on that with the term having certain negative connotations. Is that fair? Should we, we always say, there's a saying that goes around, it's largely written by and for women, but that kind of discounts other perspectives of romance, doesn't it? Alix and Nick, do you have a thought on that? Because that kind of excludes other stories, other people, other genders.
Yeah. That's just with anything in society. Women are supposed to be the more emotional ones. They're supposed to be the ones who connect easier. They're the nurturing ones. So you expect them to read something that is more emotional in nature. And men are usually discounted from doing that. They're shied away from that. If you do that, you're a sissy. And so, of course, it's going to be seen as more of a female genre, because when they do it, everyone's like, yeah, well, that's what women are supposed to read that. And then if male did it, then it's like, well, why are you doing that? You shouldn't. That's not really manly. Don't go build something or work on your car.
Go read an action book or
right,
something.
Exactly. And so it kind of perpetuates itself. And I think as society changes, then you get to see doors open up for males to feel okay and more able to kind of cross over. But yeah, I can understand why it is seen that way.
I think it also is kind of, in a way, like, I feel like the publishing landscape is already changing a lot thanks to indie authors, because in the past, I know, and still kind of like for LGBT fiction, it's even for gay romances that are, supposed to be two men engaged in a romantic relationship, it's mostly written by females, by women, and I've heard it all the time, that gay romance isn't really written for you, it's written for women, for other women. And so I think it's kind of strange in a way, because women actually have so much power within the publishing industry, because they are such a huge consumer of literature, and I think they have been for a very, very long time. So whether people want to try and twist that into something negative or kind of shame romance writers or not, women are very powerful in this career and in this industry, and I don't think that's a bad thing. But I would like to see, kind of like Nick said, a little more changes as far as what society kind of feels like is acceptable for males to read and write to, obviously excluding the cringy, overly descriptive of every woman body part imaginable type of writing. But those of us who are actually interested in reading and writing emotionally engaging stories, I would like to see more representation of that in the future.
Amber, while Wattpad's main demographic and consumer of romance and fiction in general are women, do you think this has any effect on how romance is looked at as an art form?
As an art form? Looked down upon? I don't think so. I mean, because romance, you also have to use a bit of mystery and a bit of thrill to keep readers engaged. So you have to have a lot of skill to keep readers reading and entertained and wanting to keep focusing and turning pages, or scrolling up. So I think it is a art form, and it is here to stay.
Avery, how do you look at romance as an art form? Do you consider it an art form?
Yeah, I think so. Like everyone said, it's part of the human experience. Like going back to the representation thing, like I wish everybody would read romance. I wish more men would read romance. Like I think it would be good for everybody. I think it would help. Like I don't think society encourages empathy in men. So I think that romance would probably benefit everybody if they did read more of it. Like it was a bit of a thing on Book Talk a while ago when like the L. Kennedy hockey books took off, and there was like this hockey player, I don't know if anyone knows what I'm talking about. He read some of the books, and I was like super excited because I was like, that's amazing. You've got like this college guy reading college hockey books and like TikToking about it. And I was like, I hope this becomes more of a thing. I think it would just benefit everybody so much if I think like it helps everybody see like another perspective, like they said, like whether or not it's your own lived experience or not. Romance is great for just showing you kind of the other side of things, because there's a lot of universal things that you can identify with, no matter who the character of the romance itself is.
I always tell men that if they want to understand women and what they want, then they need to read some romance novels. I always
do your homework.
Do your homework. So on another note, romance, more than any other genre, seems to revel in diversity, although obviously there have been speed bumps and difficulties along the way, especially with various romance groups like RWA. But from LGBTQ romances to Muslim romances to teen romances, there seems to be a romance novel for everyone. What do you think it is about the genre that has been able to do this with success in a way that other genres have been unable to? Alix and Nick.
Well, I think it's just like what I was hitting on before. You can plug romance into a lot of different storylines. Any world that you make up, from Star Wars to Game of Thrones to zombies, you can have that emotional human connection put in there through romance. It's something that people strive for, that they'll give their life for, that they'll fight through the whole story to get at. And where are you gonna bring in other genres into that? You can't work werewolves into everything, you can't work vampires into everything. So other genres are definitely a little less versatile in what they do.
I would definitely agree that it's the reach of romance. Like, not everybody likes... I have a friend who absolutely hates scary stories. Like, he hates them so much that he literally dipped out of our Halloween tradition of, if you come, you have to bring a scary story to share. Like, he hates them. But he'll read romance. And I think it's, again, something that, like, even if you don't have that kind of drive to have a romantic relationship with somebody, it's something that's just so recognizable. Like, you know that other people do. It's like a big life goal for most people to find that special someone or someones. And so I think that's why it has such a huge reach.
And do you think that there have been any unsuccessful things in terms of the genre? What about the genre do you think could do better in terms of diversity? How do you think that the genre could do better in terms of diversity? You can follow up with that, Alix and Nick, and then we'll get to the other panelists.
I think seeing more marginalized groups, for sure, in romance. They're getting more common now, which is amazing to see. I love going on to like Instagram and Twitter and seeing trans authors and LGBT authors putting out books about trans and LGBT characters, because, I mean, myself personally, there was a time when, not too long ago, I had no interest in writing about, even Wolf and Witch, the main love interests and characters are not trans, so they don't like fully represent me. But kind of the further I get into writing and the more I see the publishing industry kind of open up to writers like us, the more I realize how important that representation is, because trans people need to see that, just like anybody else, there are people that they can find that will love them for who they are. Same thing for any marginalized group. It's important, and I think it's important that that's written by people who understand that too, who have actually experienced it and lived it. And that's where kind of, I think, romance becomes more than just escapism for people.
Interesting. Okay. Amber, how about that? What do you think about the genre that has been able to, what do you think it is about the genre that has been able to do this with success in ways that other genres have been unable to? And what could the genre be doing better in terms of diversity?
I think that romance can expand to many readers is because everyone wants to be loved and everyone needs love. So love is a very important, I would say, virtue. And so everyone's looking for it. And while you're reading that romance, you feel loved, you feel love. And so it is very relatable. In the instance of diversity, I mean, as a Black woman, I would say that with romance, we need to, our publishers need to recognize the reach and the power of Black writers who write romance, because we have a story to tell. We fall in love too. We are complex. We are not a monolith. And we are relatable. It is fun. So I think that people, our readers, can relate to Black women because we are human just like everyone else. We fall in love. We need love. We want love. And it is time to recognize that we're here and we're not going anywhere.
I think it's always interesting when people say, oh, I can't relate to a fill in the blank, a romance with a Black heroine or LGBTQ, but they can relate to like a blue vampire. Like I think I think that sort of says it all, and says it all about the systemic racism that, you know, apparent in society. So I think and to extend that, and probably because I'm a little older than a lot of the Wattpad readers, I think that we also need to think about ageism and people who are older. A lot of the readers on Wattpad are younger, obviously, and the idea of reading about someone older is just, they don't want to do that. They don't want to imagine that. But really, desire and love don't stop when you're 25, you know? Avery, what are your thoughts on this? What do you think the genre has been able to do with success in a way that other genres have been unable to?
Yeah, I think like everybody deserves to see their happy ending reflected. Like, I think it seems like the landscape is changing. It's been slow from what like I can gather as a bit more of an outsider to some of those things. But traditional is slow in general that way, I find. So that's kind of, I think, one of the really nice things about Wattpad is there's like a lot less gatekeeping there, and there's an opportunity for people to tell their own stories.
Avery, you can stay up on the screen, because my question for you is, with romance's ability to be as inclusive as it is, do you believe it has a specific role to play in society?
Yeah, like I said, I just think everybody deserves to see their own happy ending or get that happy ending. I think that like some of this is just more like my outsider perspective from what I've seen other people in marginalized groups remark on, but I've heard them say things like publishers sometimes want their books to be like issue related books. And I don't think that that's necessarily fair to those groups. I think those groups deserve to have fun, fluffy romances just like everybody else. And I think that that's like a really empowering thing, because yeah, I just think everybody deserves to have that representation.
Amber, how about you? With romance's ability to be inclusive, do you believe that it has a specific role to play?
I would say yes, because we go into bookstores a lot and we see books with characters on the cover that do not look like us. We see romance stories that do not look like us, and we're supposed to just pick these books out and relate to them. And we have been doing this for years, and it's like we hit this level where we're tired, and we are ready to see more stories written from different viewpoints. And I think it also keeps things fresh and keeps things inviting and fun when you can put yourself in someone else's shoes and learn from a different person's point of view. It also gives us more empathy for humanity when we learn about other people's lives and struggles and flaws.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so here's the controversial question, and this comes up on Twitter every now and then. I'll start with Alix and Nick. Do you think romance requires an HEA? And for those who don't know what that is, it's a happy ever after. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. It fundamentally does, because on a technical level, yes, it requires a happily ever after because that's what your audience expects. But also because if it's not, then it's a tragedy. And that fundamentally is not romance. So technically, if you don't have the happily ever after, you're writing a tragedy, not a romance. So you're wrong there. But the other one is your audience, like you said. So really, non-technically speaking, if your audience is there for it, then that's all that matters. If like Romeo and Juliet doesn't have a happy ending, but it's still held up there as one of the greatest romances of all time. And you have people arguing to this day, is it a tragedy? Is it a romance? So it's on the audience. If your audience is there for it, then I believe you have a romance. If they believe it's a romance. If they don't believe it's a romance, then it's not a romance. But it's up to the audience to decide.
I'd definitely say err on the side of caution and at least a happily ever after for now. Which for us, like I said, as drama writers and tragedy writers, was extremely difficult to kind of get the characters to grow in that direction, because our kind of instinct
he was
is
after me too. He's like, okay, I know what you do. It is like,
you're gonna make it worse. We can't keep making it worse. They have to get together.
There has to be a reprieve at the end. It has to end. I don't know where you're going with this, but it has to end on a happily ever after, goddammit.
You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? But,
it's the stubbornness in me. I was like, I'm gonna make it as bad as we can.
But really, yeah, your audience expectation for romance, I feel like, is so specific in a way, in terms that aren't quite the same in a lot of other genres. Like in a Western, there are a lot of different elements that go into making it feel like a Western or a historical fiction or a sci-fi or a horror. But for romance, if you don't deliver certain things in it, your readers are going to leave disappointed, and they're not going to come back, and they're not going to want to read your next work in progress or your next project, because you're going to break that trust.
Exactly. You're going to lose their trust. And once your audience doesn't trust you, then they're not going to read anything else you put out. They're not going to be back for that next book. They're
like, I was waiting for those two to hook up, and they never gave it to me. Yeah. I'm done.
It's true. And it's true. And there's a big difference between a love story like Nicholas Sparks and a romance. I always say, if somebody dies at the end, if one of the main characters in the couple dies at the end, it's not a romance. But I want to hear what Avery and Amber have to say. Avery, do you need an HEA and happy ever after for a romance, or can it end in another way?
No, like, I will die on this hill. You can have like romantic elements or whatever you want to call it, if it does not have like at least a happily for now. I mean, if it's YA or something, that's totally understandable, that like maybe there's not the proposal or something or implication that they're going to live together forever. But it's part of the contract that you are basically entering into with your reader. It is part of your reader's expectations going in, and it's part of like that, I think, safety. Like, you're kind of asking to like, hold my hand, I'm going to take you on this really wild journey. It might be super painful, but at the end it's going to be worth it. So I think if you don't keep that up, you're really just violating the promise that you've made. And that is just the definition of the genre. Like, I don't know why not everyone, but occasionally it comes up and people try to redefine it. And like, I'm not super familiar with the other conventions of other genres, but like, I don't go into sci-fi and tell you how to write sci-fi. Like, you can write whatever you want, you just can't call it a romance. So,
right. Like, can you imagine, okay, I'm going to write a mystery, but the homicide will never be solved. Like, imagine that. How unsatisfying would that be, right?
I'd be upset.
Amber, what about you? Do you think, are you in team HEA?
I am, and I'm also in happily ever after for now, right? Because I love keeping a little mystery in, but I think our readers expect them to fall in love and have a happily ever after, so we have to uphold that, and we have to keep their, like it was said already, keep their trust.
Yeah, I also think I think happy for now is probably a better way of thinking about it, because happy ever after, sort of the traditional happy ever after of marriage and children, in some ways, I've always felt that's a little heteronormative. And it's also, if you're writing about characters who are young, who are 18 or 20, is marriage, is that even, I didn't get married till much later in life. So is that everyone's experience? Is that the norm that we should be holding up as the gold standard, to get married at 20? Certainly in some cultures, absolutely. Maybe not in all cultures, though. And while it's really nice to think that you might find your soulmate at 20, perhaps it's just a happy for now, and those people are happy for a little while. I don't think that marriage and babies are necessarily the default for everybody, and we need to reflect that in our stories. Does anyone have any thoughts about that?
I mean, I agree. Marriage isn't everyone's end game. Some people don't want to get married. Some people don't want to have kids, or some can't have kids. So it is not our focus to have kids and get married. You may just want to find someone that you can fall in love with and travel around the world. It depends on the character's goal for what they think will make them happy for the rest of their lives or for the next 3 months. So, I mean, we can never know.
Anyone else on that thought?
I think it just depends on like the characters in the story. Like I think it's nice to see, again, it's like a representation thing. Like I have a couple that's going to end up together and they like decided to be child free. And that's just like always been my plan for that couple. And it just suits that couple. So yeah, I think like happy can be broad, right? It just needs to be happy. That's all I ask.
Exactly.
I mean, we had in our Western, we have two characters that have gone through their whole lives, but the feud between the families has kept them apart. And they're not the main characters, but they're side characters. But they are definitely well past their
prime.
Yeah, and they even have a child together. They were never married, but they did have a child together, and he's like in his 20s at the time of the story. And there's a moment in the story, which is my favorite moment, where he finally goes to her, and the father goes and proposes to her. And she just breaks down because, you know, it's been all these years and through all this stuff that's going on. And because the whole kind of Western is based on like this feud, you have a lot of death and, you know,
tragedy.
All sorts of that. So it's just such a nice moment to see these two characters come together. And I was like, I like that they're not, you know, 18 or 20. I like that they have, you know, they have lifetime of scars and regrets
they
behind
have an
them.
Adult child.
Yeah, they're not going to have any more kids. They do have a child with each other, but he's grown and just, you know, he's an adult now. But just that they could still come back and achieve that and still find happiness. It's one of my favorite moments that we've written.
That was the first part in that book that actually made me cry
while
we were writing.
Oh yeah,
because it was just so sweet, and it, like he said, it's such a reprieve. And there's something, I think, to me at this point in my life that I feel like is extra special, because I'm not a young adult anymore, but I'm not that old yet. But like, I know when I was in my 20s, like, you know, I thought I was in love a bunch of times, like you're still growing and you're still learning. But by the time you're like my parents' age, you're an adult, you're fully grown, you know what you want in your life by that point. And especially as far as I think a romantic partner, the connection that you can have at that age, in my mind, is something so much more special in a way. And I would love to see that more often. I definitely would love to see more couples like us in books getting happily ever afters, because I mean, obviously children are not biological children anyway, or not in the future, not for a lack of trying, but
we have fuzzy ones.
Yeah, that's it's I almost think it's kind of unhealthy in a way or kind of negligent for romances to set up this really high expectation of you have to be with that person who was your meet cute for the rest of forever, and this is going to be that forever relationship. Like, no, but you can be happy at the end and, you know, it not last forever, but that doesn't make you horrible people. That just makes you human.
So the other question I had was sex in a romance. It's something people talk about a lot, obviously. Does a romance need sex? Do you write sex, and does a romance need to have open door sex scenes? Avery.
I don't think it has to. I know clean romance, especially in indie, is like killing it these days. So obviously there's a huge market for that. Everyone just has like different preferences in that regard. Like I do write a pretty high heat level. I think it furthers the emotional journey from like my particular stories and my characters. And that's just, I've found my audience that like that resonates with. So that works for us. But I don't think it's any less valid to have like closed door, like fade to black, or even a clean romance, like where maybe there's just no sexual activities happening. Like I think everybody's romantic experience and sexual, like there's just so many variables there that like whatever is going to be the story of the author's heart is going to find an audience.
Amber, how about you?
I mean, I don't think it's needed or it's important for every book to have it. I just base it off of my characters. If they want to get frisky, then they get frisky. If they don't, then they don't. It just depends on the character.
Alix and Nick?
I think it's just right with what Amber said. It depends on the characters. It depends on the story. We usually go through and we'll write everything out, and then before we publish a chapter, we'll be like, is this necessary? Does this
further?
Yeah, is it paced well? Is it relevant to the story? Does it add anything? If we can cut it and it doesn't change anything, why would we leave it in? Do we think our readers want it? And usually our readers do want it, and we want to give our readers what they want. So, like, we'll leave it in. And if it gets less views and looks like people are skipping it, then we'll edit it out. We'll just remove it because our readers told us that it didn't count. And there goes the camera again.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Amber, just a question. I'm curious. Do you plot out your books before you write them, and do you plot in the sex scenes, or is that something that, are you a pantster?
I am a little bit of both. So I do not, it depends on the book, because sometimes I just get it, like with my new story that I'm writing in December for Ink and Lust, the Christmas special. I just got it. I was just like, okay, so it starts with sex, boom, and we're in it. It depends on what I get. Am I inspired by it? What song I'm listening to? If I'm listening to a Meg Thee Stallion song, then it's most likely going to be in. If I'm listening to a Tamia song, then it's probably Gentle Touches and Hand Raises. So it depends on the moment.
Avery, how about you? Do you plot that in when you plot your books, or do you even plot your books?
I try. I'm kind of chaotic. I write out of order. It's just, my process is like very messy. And then I kind of like quilt it all together at the end, which I 0 out of 10 recommend. Don't do it. But I usually have like an idea of some of the goalposts or like the major pivotal points in the story, which usually does include sex. So usually going in, I have some idea of maybe the first time they have sex, maybe the first time they have like lovey sex. There's usually like a handful of things, because I do try to make sure that the sex is like directly furthering the plot and the emotional development. So it is one of those things I usually have some idea of going forward, but sometimes the characters have minds of their own and jump into bed sooner. So it just depends.
Okay, I'm not sure if we lost Alix and Nick, or if they can hear us.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Would you like to take that? Do you plot out your sex scenes, and do you even plot your stories?
We do a really loose plotting. We generally know kind of where we want it to go, but we're much more on the pantser side, I would say, of things. As far as the sex scenes, we never plot those out, because they're usually not very long, and they're very kind of, I would say that they're more emotional type of scenes. They're more desire.
Oh, we lost them all together. Oh no.
Oh gosh.
Well, hopefully they will come back very quickly. In the meantime, let's talk about, we have a little bit of time, and if there are any questions, feel free to put them in the comments and we will answer them. So if you're out there in the audience, please feel free to do that. Amber, where would you like to see the genre go in the next decade?
I would like to see more stories based on characters that we don't normally see. I would like to see more inclusion. And I would like to see people relating to characters that they wouldn't normally relate to, or characters that don't look like them. So that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Alix and Nick are back, so I will ask them.
Sorry.
Welcome back.
Who knows how long we'll be here?
Where would you like to see the genre go in the next decade?
Really, I think just continuing with the inclusiveness that has been going on. I think platforms like Wattpad and indie publishing have definitely been helping and speeding that up, because I do feel like there's still gatekeeping within traditional publishing. It's nice to see people breaking into that finally, but I'm sure it's been a really difficult fight, and I'm really appreciative that they're getting out there and doing it, but I'd like to see more of that for sure.
Avery, how about you?
Yeah, like I think what everyone else has touched on, like it seems like it's heading in a positive direction, but like they said, especially traditional publishing is not always the most responsive, and it can take a lot of time to really like enact that change.
Yeah, I do feel that Wattpad will be the way. Wattpad and apps like Wattpad will be the wave of the future. I do feel like the next big romance novel, the next great American novel, so to speak, will come from Wattpad. That's my thought anyway. Again, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the comments and we will answer them. I do have one curious question. What would be the one thing you would tell a new author about writing a romance? What would be the one tip that you would tell them? What can they do to be a better romance author? Amber, what do you say about that?
The one thing, read a lot of romance, I guess. And well, I have a second one.
Okay.
Can I say the second one too?
All right.
Okay. The second one would be to write what you love.
Okay. Avery, how about you?
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Like my first thought was writing what you love, because for me that's really important. Like I cannot write if I'm not emotionally connecting with the story. I know it's different for some people. Like I'm very woo about it. I don't know, which is frustrating because then when it goes, I hit the wall. But also the reading romance thing is, I think, huge. You get a lot of like newer authors sometimes, I think, who think it's going to be easy or like an easy way to make money, but they kind of like poo-poo the genre and they don't actually read in it. And like, you're not going to be able to deliver any kind of satisfying experience if you're not familiar with the genre. And like, why are you here if you don't respect it? So I think definitely just being familiar like with your genre, no matter what you write, is always solid advice.
Alix and Nick, how about you?
I think it's picking something that you want your audience to relate to. That particular struggle, as we said, we're all going towards that love and acceptance at the end of the story, to find that happy, cozy place that we want to be at. And as long as you bring your readers on that journey, let them into your head, let them into your characters. Don't get stuck in that mechanical, this is what a romance is, A, B, and C. But put yourself in that position. Your readers will see that because they can smell fake a mile away. So if you're putting a little bit of yourself, it doesn't have to be, anything crazy. But as long as there's a hint of you in that person that you're writing for, that blue vampire, as we said earlier, then your readers are going to connect to it. They're going to love it, and they're going to be there with you for the whole journey.
Okay. I always say that my biggest tip is to read Harlequin category romances, which are 50,000 word stories, and they're very traditional, but they really teach you how to pack a lot of emotion, action, dialogue, and sex in a very short package. And they're very difficult to write. I have never been able to sell one. In fact, my book Drive started out as a submission to Harlequin, and it was rejected because it was just too out there and didn't fit the conventions of that particular submission call. But it's very hard to write. And we do have a couple of questions. Okay, this is a really good one. How do you identify your ideal reader when it comes to the romance books you write? Amber.
My ideal reader.
How do you identify that reader?
I don't really know. I just write the characters and hope someone likes it. I mean, it's just a gamble for me.
Avery, how about you? Do you identify your ideal reader, or do you write what you want to write?
Yeah, I think I'm just fortunate that like what I write and what tends to be commercial, like there's a big overlap. Like I genuinely enjoy that, but I don't really consciously think of it other than trying to just adhere to like the genre conventions of romance and delivering like those expectations. But I don't really think too consciously about the ideal reader. I mean, until maybe later in this process if I'm marketing.
Alix and Nick, do you identify an ideal reader?
I really think because Avery kind of mentioned marketing, I think when you're choosing the tone of your romance or your book in general, I think you need to be conscious of that, because somebody and we ran into this, our earlier versions of our blurb, after a little while and getting comments, we realized it was setting people up for expectations that were not going to be met by our book. They were coming in expecting like Harry Potter, fluffy romance, and we were like, oh, you're in the wrong side of town. So I think knowing that is definitely a good way to identify what kind of audience you're writing for. And then that allows you to do what you're going to do best within that genre.
Okay, great. We've got time for a couple more questions. Do you put a lot of yourself into your characters to help forge a connection while you write them? Amber?
Just a little bit. I mean, I am not like my characters, but I put maybe a little pieces of me, little pieces of people that I have met. Even if I've seen them at the store, I may take a quality from them to make them more human. I think if you put a little piece of, or a little ingredient of a actual human being in a character that you create, it makes them more relatable, makes them more real.
Okay. Alix and Nick, do you put yourself in your characters to help forge a connection while you write?
I think it's impossible not to, because I can only write what I know, and that's all me. So usually a character will be a piece of a personality or something, or
character flaws.
Yeah.
We usually draw a lot of character flaws from ourselves.
Yeah, or people that I'm very close to, people within my family that I understand. I might not understand fully, but I recognize certain qualities in them, and I think they're interesting, and I want to write them, so I do. But I think it's impossible to write a character that isn't a part of me, because yeah, they come from me, so therefore they are a part of me.
Avery, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's like what everyone's touched on. Like there's no like blatant inserts of myself or like carbon copies of anybody I know, but you're definitely going to take elements here and there. And I think it does help it make it seem more genuine. Like, especially when it comes to the flaws, like definitely I will pick some of my flaws and insert them in various characters. Like one of my heroines is fairly neurotic, and I'm like, well, I have no idea where she gets that from. But like my heroes like to curse a lot. So there's bits of me in everything.
We're about to wrap up here. We did have one question that said, is it true that you have to have an HEA in order for a story to be romance? We all equivocally agreed that at least happy for now is necessary for a romance. If it focuses on the romance, but it just doesn't work out, it's not a romance. It can be a love story. It can be women's fiction. It can be any other genre. And I think that that's it. We do have one more question. And anyone who wants to take that can take this. How can you write a romance novel without all the bedroom scenes and a young age? Does anyone want to tackle that? Okay.
I think we kind of mentioned before, but romance is an emotion, character-driven genre. So I think a lot of because you have a meet cute, basically, in every romance, the sex scenes that follow that, unless there are any significant time jumps, those sex scenes come out of desire and attraction more in my opinion, then they come out of actual love. So if you're wanting to write a clean romance story, you just find the other things about your characters that they're attracted to. Like, there's a lot more that I'm attracted to, about somebody besides just would I want to, hop in bed with them or not. In fact, ideally, your characters are attracted to each other for more than just the steamy interactions.
We're in that anthology, and one of the writers for their story, they challenged that exact question, and they made a sci-fi romance that was a human alien, and they were physically incompatible. Yeah. They just could not. And it still hit all of the beats of a romance.
Yeah.
They still decided to be together, and just prove that the physicality part wasn't what drew them to each other. It had no bearing on their feelings for each other. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really just a great way to kind of stick that up on its end and be like, romance and the physical side of it, sex, are not dependent upon each other.
Yeah.
That is a great way to end this. Romance is about emotion. It's about love. It's about respect, consent. And I'm so glad we were all able to have this early morning discussion today. Thank you all for being here. And thank you all in the audience for coming out on your Saturday morning. The next panel will be the Art of the DIY, the self-publishing panel. So make sure to check that out, and all of the other awesome panels, expos, and meet and greet booths. And I thank you all for being here. Have a great rest of your conference.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.